The Shadow in Red Gloves. In October 1993, an electric train from Moscow's Kursky station rattles through the dark fields of the Moscow suburbs, lulling its weary passengers with the rhythmic clack of wheels. Among them sits a man in bright red gloves, clutching a bag stuffed with stolen goods. His name is Stanislav Smeyan, and less than an hour ago, he coldly murdered 3 people. Smeyan smiles, pours imported wine for 2 chance female companions, and toasts to a successful deal. His charm masks a chilling truth. This short man with a steely gaze is not just a thief, but an emerging monster whose thirst for power and blood will soon shake the Moscow region to its core. Russia in the early 90s is a nation drowning in chaos. Economic collapse, a crumbling legal system, and rampant crime fuel a wave of violence. In 1994, official statistics report a grim milestone: 32,000 souls fall victim to murderers. Yet, even against this brutal backdrop, Smeyan's gang stands out for its savagery. Over mere months, they carve a bloody trail of robberies and killings, leaving behind bound and mutilated bodies. In the quiet town of Kashira, where neighbors once left doors unlocked, their crimes become a nightmare from which there is no waking. Who is Stanislav Smeyan? As a child, he was just a small boy yearning to escape obscurity, but prison and the tutelage of hardened criminals forged him into a predator for whom human life is a mere obstacle. His gang is a collection of lost souls. Viktor Koryakin, a former Marine broken by Smeyan's charisma. Elena Laricheva, a young woman drawn into the horror by love or fear, and others whose fates collide in a fatal moment. Together they build a machine of death, each axe blow or gunshot a step deeper into the abyss. Why did they kill? What drove them to atrocities that left even seasoned detectives reeling? And how did a man barely 5 feet tall, with a Napoleon complex, become a devil who believed in his own God? This investigation plunges into the darkest corners of human nature, where fear, greed, and power knot into a deadly tangle. From the first murder in a Moscow courtyard to the final slaughter in Kashira, from a homemade pistol to the icons Smeyan carved between crimes, this story unveils not just a gang's chronicle, but the era that birthed it. Ahead lie 5 chapters, each pulling you deeper into the nightmare. You'll witness evil's birth, see ordinary people become accomplices, and watch justice, however delayed, close in. But one question lingers. Could Smeyan have been stopped sooner, or does his shadow still lurk among us? Brace yourself, this story won't let go until the final page. Chapter 1. The Making of a Monster. In the early 90s, Russia was a land where hope bled out on the streets, and a boy with a Napoleon complex learned that power comes from fear. This is how Stanislav Smeyan began his descent into darkness. The train's wheels screech as it pulls into Moscow's Kursky station, October 1993. A man steps onto the platform, his bright red gloves a stark contrast to the grayness of the crowd. Stanislav Smeyan, barely 5 feet tall, carries a heavy bag slung over his shoulder. Inside are the spoils of his latest crime: jewelry, cash, and a bottle of foreign liquor. Trophies from a triple murder committed just hours ago. His face betrays no guilt, only a flicker of satisfaction. To the world, he's a nobody. To himself, he's a king in the making. But how does a small-time thief become the architect of one of the most brutal crime sprees in Moscow's suburbs? To understand, we must go back to a Russia unraveling, to a boy who refused to be invisible, and to the lessons that forged a monster, a nation in free fall. Russia in the early 1990s was a country on its knees. The Soviet Union's collapse left millions adrift in a sea of poverty and uncertainty. Factories shuttered, savings evaporated, and the rule of law became a distant memory. By 1990, official statistics painted a grim picture. Over 32,000 murders, a million serious crimes, and a justice system too weak to stem the tide. The streets of Moscow and its suburbs buzzed with desperation. Street gangs, black market deals, and a pervasive sense that survival meant taking what you could. In this chaos, men like Smeyan didn't just survive, they thrived. Kashira, a sleepy town south of Moscow, seemed a world apart. Neighbors knew each other's names and doors were often left unlocked. But even here, the shadow of the era crept in. The local police, underfunded and overwhelmed, struggled to keep up with rising thefts and assaults. It was a perfect hunting ground for someone like Smeyan, whose ambitions far exceeded his stature. But ambition alone doesn't make a killer. Something darker was at work, rooted in a childhood that taught him the world respects only strength, the boy who wouldn't be small. Stanislav Smeyan was born in 1961 in Krasnoyarsk, a Siberian city as harsh as the winters that gripped it. Small and wiry, he was an easy target for bullies. Classmates mocked his height, and his slight frame made him feel like an outsider in his own life. But Smeyan had a fire inside, a stubborn, unyielding need to prove he was more. By his teens, he discovered a way to command respect: crime. Petty thefts at first, pickpocketing, shoplifting, gave him pocket money and a taste of power. He wasn't just stealing goods, he was stealing control. His small size became an asset. Smeyan could slip through windows, crawl through vents, and vanish into crowds. By his early 20s, he was a seasoned burglar, targeting apartments in Krasnoyarsk's crumbling neighborhoods. Each job brought a rush, the thrill of outsmarting his marks, the weight of stolen cash in his hands, the glances of admiration from peers who once dismissed him. Women, too, began to notice the man who carried himself like he owned the streets. But the high was fleeting. A botched burglary landed him in prison at 23, and it was there behind bars that Smeyan's transformation began. The school of the damned. Prison in Soviet Russia was no place for the weak. For Smeyan, it was a crucible. Surrounded by hardened criminals, murderers, extortionists, thieves, he absorbed lessons that would define his future. His cellmates, men with scars and stories, taught him the underworld's brutal code. Hesitation is death, and witnesses are liabilities. One older inmate, a lifer convicted of double murder, told him something that stuck. Killing's just business. Everyone's got the instinct. Most just bury it. Smeyan listened, his mind turning over the idea like a blade in his hand. If power came from fear, then taking a life was the ultimate currency. He served a year and a half for his first stint, emerging in 1980 with a sharper edge. Back on the streets, he resumed his burglaries, but now with a colder calculus. If someone caught him mid-job, he'd intimidate them, brandish a knife, bark threats. It worked until it didn't. In 1987, a homeowner fought back, and Smeyan was arrested again. This time, the sentence was 5 years, and the prison was harsher. His mentors were worse too, men who spoke of murder with the casualness of a morning cigarette. They drilled into him a new rule: no one who sees your face loves. Smeyan, now in his late 20s, internalized it. When he walked free in 1992, he wasn't the same man. The boy who stole for respect was gone. In his place was a predator hunting for dominance. The First Blood. Summer 1992. Moscow was Smeyan's new playground. Fresh from prison, he settled on the city's outskirts in Pokrov, a gritty town 100 kilometers from the capital. The streets teemed with opportunity, unlocked doors, distracted residents, and a police force stretched thin. Smeyan didn't waste time. He cased neighborhoods, mapping out targets with the precision of a hunter. His first big score came in a Moscow courtyard, overheard by chance. An elderly woman chatting with her granddaughter mentioned an empty apartment nearby. Smeyan's pulse quickened. This was his moment. He trailed the woman and child home, waiting until they entered their building. Then, under cover of dusk, he slipped inside. The apartment was as promised, quiet, unguarded, rich with valuables. But there was a complication. A teenage grandson was home. Smeyan didn't hesitate. Brandishing a knife, he bound the woman, the girl, and the boy with rope. He demanded cash and jewelry, his voice low and commanding. The family complied, trembling. But Smeyan had made a decision. No witnesses. With chilling efficiency, he stabbed each one, delivering over 20 wounds in total. Blood soaked the floor as he packed his bag with loot. Before leaving, he poured a glass of vodka from the family's bar, downed it, and walked out into the night. The red gloves. That evening, Smeyan boarded an electric train at Kurski station, his bag heavier, his confidence soaring. The red gloves, his signature, a bold defiance of anonymity, caught the eye of two young women in the carriage. Smeyan, buzzed from vodka and adrenaline, played the gentleman. He offered them drinks, spun tales of a business deal, and flashed a smile that hid the blood on his hands. The women, charmed, had no idea they were sharing wine with a killer. One of them, from Pokrov, invited him to visit. Smeyan saw opportunity, not just in her, but in the chaos of the era. He could build something bigger, a gang, a legacy. This moment, fleeting and mundane, was the spark. Smeyan's charm, his ability to manipulate, would soon draw others into his orbit. Viktor Koryakin, a broken ex-Marine. Elena Laricheva, a woman teetering on the edge of desperation, and others who would become cogs in his machine of death. But for now, Smeyan was alone, savoring his triumph. The triple murder hadn't just filled his pockets, it had baptized him in blood. He'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. A monster's creed. Why did Smeyan kill? Psychologists would later point to his height, his childhood taunts, his need to overcompensate. But it was more than that. In prison, he'd learned that power wasn't just money or respect. It was control over life and death. Each kill was a statement. I am not small. I am not weak. I am your God. Smeyan's later words to Laricheva when she questioned his faith revealed his twisted theology. My God is stronger than yours. To him, murder was a sacrament, a way to assert his will over a world that had once dismissed him. Chapter 2: The Birth of the Beast. A quiet evening in Kashira, January 1993. A phone call shatters the silence, reporting a massacre that will haunt the town forever. Stanislav Smeyan's gang is no longer a rumor. It's a nightmare made flesh. The snow falls gently on the village of Sorokino, a cluster of modest homes on the outskirts of Kashira, 100 kilometers south of Moscow. It's January 14th, 1990, and the air is thick with the stillness of a winter night. Inside one house, a family gathers, unaware that death is already at their door. Stanislav Smeyan, the man in the red gloves, has chosen his next target. No longer a lone predator, he's forged a gang. Viktor Koryakin, a broken ex-Marine, and Elena Laricheva, a young woman enthralled by his dark charisma. Together they've come to Sorokino not just to steal, but to kill. What unfolds in that house will shock even the most hardened detectives and mark the moment Smeyan's name becomes synonymous with terror. But how did this trio come together, and what drives them to such savagery? To trace the bloody steps that led them here. The electric train pact. It all began 3 months earlier, in October 1992, on that fateful electric train from Moscow's Kurski station. Smeyan, fresh from a triple murder, was flush with confidence. His red gloves caught the eye of two women in the carriage, their laughter mingling with the clink of glasses as he poured imported wine. One, a resident of Pokrov, invited him to visit, unaware she was opening the door to a monster. Smeyan saw more than a fleeting connection. He saw potential. In Pokrov, he didn't just charm the woman, He claimed her home as a base. Days later, her husband, Viktor Koryakin, returned. A former Marine, Koryakin was a man of strength but no spine. When he found Smeyan in his house, he didn't fight. Smeyan, sensing weakness, offered a deal. Join me and you'll have money, liquor, and power. Koryakin, humiliated but desperate, agreed. The gang's first seed was planted. Koryakin was no innocent. A man adrift in the economic ruin of 90s Russia. He had lost his purpose when the military spit him out. Smeyan's promise of easy wealth was a lifeline, and his commanding presence, a mix of menace and charisma, sealed the deal. But Smeyan needed more than muscle. He needed loyalty, fear, and someone to share his twisted vision. Enter Elena Laracheva, a 20-year-old drifter who appeared in Pokrov by late 1992. Laracheva was drawn to Smeyan's intensity, mistaking his cruelty for strength. When Koryakin's wife left, unable to stomach the new order, Laracheva stepped in, eager to prove herself. Smeyan saw her as a tool, malleable, devoted, and willing to cross lines others wouldn't. By November, the trio was complete. Smeyan, the mastermind, Koryakin, the enforcer, and Laracheva, the accomplice, bound by a pact forged in blood. The first test. Their first joint crime was a baptism of fire. On November 17, 1992, in a Moscow suburb, Smeyan led Koryakin to a target, Valentina Mikotina, a middle-aged woman returning home from work. They waited in her building's stairwell, the air heavy with anticipation. Smeyan had planned it meticulously. Strike fast, take everything, leave no one alive. As Mikotina entered the elevator, Smeyan drew a homemade pistol, its crude barrel gleaming. She screamed, and he struck her with the gun's handle, sending her crumpling to the floor. Koryakin, ordered to finish the bream, hesitated for a split second. Smeyan's glare was enough. Koryakin stabbed her, the blade sinking into her flesh 6 times. They fled with a gold ring, a few hundred rubles, and a bag of groceries. A paltry haul, but that wasn't the point. Smeyan clapped Koryakin on the back in the electric train later, grinning. "We're bound by blood now," he said. Mikotina miraculously survived, her life saved by surgeons. But Smeyan didn't know, and the taste of violence only sharpened his hunger. Laracheva's initiation came soon after. In early December, in the town of Stupino, Smeyan chose a house at random, pointing from the train window like a general selecting a battlefield. The plan was simple. Laracheva would knock, posing as a stranded motorist needing tools. When 67-year-old Ivan Falatov opened the door, Smeyan and Koryakin burst in. They bound Falatov, his wife, and their 11-year-old grandson Maxim, who was upstairs. Smeyan rummaged for valuables while Koryakin stood guard. Then came the test. Smeyan handed Koryakin a knife and pointed to the boy. "Kids have good memories," he said. Koryakin, pale but obedient, laid the bound child on a bed, stuffed a rag in his mouth, and stabbed. The boy's body took 22 wounds. Laracheva, forced to watch, felt her stomach churn, but said nothing. Smeyan, unsatisfied, grabbed an axe and hacked the elderly couple to death. Filatov's wife Victoria survived, though barely, paralyzed, nearly blind, and mute. She'd never speak of what she saw. The gang left with bags of loot, Smeyan whistling as they boarded the next train. Laracheva, now complicit, was his forever. The machine of death. By late 1992, Smeyan's gang was a well-oiled machine. They operated like a pack of wolves, each member with a role. Smeyan planned and commanded, his small frame radiating authority. Koryakin, the muscle, executed orders with grim efficiency. Laracheva, the lure, used her youth to lower defenses. Their targets were random, yet deliberate. Houses that looked prosperous, families unlikely to fight back. Smeyan's rules were ironclad: no witnesses, no mercy. He'd learned in prison that hesitation breeds failure, and he drilled this into his followers. Laracheva later recalled his chilling mantra, "You kill with pleasure, or you're nothing." To Smeyan, murder wasn't just practical, it was exhilarating, a way to bend the world to his will. Their spree intensified. On December 9th in Elektrogorsk, they targeted dental technician Evgeny Salnov. Smeyan and Kuryakin were packing stolen goods when Salnov returned home unexpectedly. He begged for his life, offering to drive their haul anywhere they wanted. Smeyan, amused, poured him a glass of vodka. Salnov drank, hope flickering in his eyes. Then Smeyan nodded to Kuryakin, who hesitated. "Don't," Kuryakin muttered, but Smeyan's stare silenced him. Kuryakin stepped outside, carrying bags, and heard a dull thud. Smeyan emerged, axe in hand, blood flecking his gloves. Salnov was dead, his skull split. Kuryakin, sickened but trapped, said nothing. The gang moved on, their bond tightening with each crime, their humanity slipping away. The night in Sorokino. January 14, 1993, Sorokino. The house on the edge of the village glowed faintly, its windows warm against the snow. Smeyan had scouted it days earlier, noting the elderly residents and the absence of alarms. At 11 p.m., the gang struck. Laracheva knocked, her voice trembling as she spun her story. The door opened, and Smeyan's homemade pistol flashed. They stormed inside, binding the occupants. 2 elderly women, an older man, and another man in the living room. Smeyan barked orders, his voice a low growl. Kuryakin tied ropes, Laracheva stuffed gags. The house was ransacked, clothes and trinkets strewn across the floor. Then Smeyan raised his pistol. 4 shots rang out, each a precise headshot. Blood pooled on the carpet, the air thick with the coppery stench. The gang grabbed their haul and fled, dropping the pistol in their haste, a mistake that would haunt them. Across the street, a neighbor heard a muffled scream. Zoya Grishina, bloodied and staggering, collapsed on their porch. She'd been in the house, a guest, and somehow survived. Before losing consciousness, she gasped, "3 of them! The leader's called Stas!" The neighbor called the police, and within minutes, Kashira's criminal investigation unit was on the scene. Led by the chief of the criminal police, they entered the house and froze. The sight was apocalyptic. 2 women bound in chairs, gagged, their heads shattered by bullets. The old man on the floor, his throat a red ruin, another body in the living room, lifeless. Even seasoned officers felt their stomachs turn. "It was like stepping into hell," one later said. The scattered belongings screamed robbery, but the precision of the killings spoke of something darker, a ritual of control. The hunt begins. The police move fast. 5 spent casings from a small caliber weapon were found amid the chaos, along with a deformed bullet. A search of the surrounding area turned up the homemade pistol, discarded on a road to the nearby train station. Ballistics confirmed it was the murder weapon. Footprints in the snow led toward Kashira 2, across the railway tracks, suggesting the killers hadn't boarded a train. Grishina, revived briefly before surgery, gave a crucial clue. The leader was short, maybe 5 feet, called Stas. The police had a name, a description, and a trail. An all-points bulletin went out to every station in the Moscow region. Empty liquor bottles littering the crime scene hinted at drunken killers, possibly still nearby. By morning, a lead emerged. A precinct officer from Runovsky, 10 kilometers away, reported sightings of a man matching Stas's description. His name, Stanislav Smeyan. He'd been seen at his sister's house in the settlement. Undercover officers visited, and a detective, posing as a neighbor, lifted fingerprints from a door handle. The prints matched those on the bottles and pistol from Sorokino. The net was closing. That evening, a stakeout paid off. Two men approached the sisters' house, one short, the other tall, both carrying heavy bags. A third figure, a woman, waited nearby. The police pounced, arresting Smeyan, Koryakin, and Laricheva. The gang that had terrorized the suburbs was in custody, but the full horror of their crimes was only beginning to unfold. The monster's shadow. The Sorokino massacre wasn't just a crime, it was a declaration. Smeyan had built his gang, tested their loyalty, and unleashed them on a town that never saw them coming. His control over Koryakin and Laricheva was absolute, forged through fear and blood. Laricheva's later testimony revealed Smeyan's chilling philosophy: you must kill with pleasure. Koryakin, once a man of honor, was reduced to a puppet, his hands stained by orders he couldn't refuse. The gang's efficiency, scouting, striking, vanishing, showed a predator's cunning, but their arrogance, leaving clues like the pistol, betrayed them. Kashira reeled. The town's innocence died with the victims, replaced by locked doors and whispered fears. The police, now with suspects, faced a daunting task: piecing together the gang's full trail of destruction. Smeyan, in custody, was calm, almost smug. He had built his empire, however briefly, and left a mark no one could erase. But questions lingered. How many more had died by his hand? Who else had joined his twisted crusade? And what drove a man to see murder as a divine right? The answers lay in the months ahead, as investigators dug deeper and the suburbs braced for more revelations. Chapter 3. The Devil's Playground. In the winter of 993, Kashira's police hold 3 suspects in a blood-soaked massacre, but the truth is far worse than they feared. Stanislav Smeyan's gang didn't just kill, they played a deadly game, and the suburbs were their board. The interrogation room in Kashira's police station is a stark cube of peeling paint and flickering fluorescent light. It's January 15th, 1990, just hours after the arrests of Stanislav Smeyan, Viktor Koryakin, and Elena Laricheva. Smeyan sits across from a grizzled detective, his small frame slouched but his eyes sharp, almost amused. The air is heavy with cigarette smoke and unspoken dread. The Sorokino massacre, 4 dead, 1 survivor clinging to life, has shaken the town. But the detectives sense this is only the beginning. Smeyan's red gloves, now bagged as evidence, seem to mock them from the evidence table. As investigators dig, they uncover a trail of horrors stretching back months, each crime more brazen than the last. Smeyan wasn't just a killer, he was a conductor of chaos, turning quiet suburbs into his personal playground. This is the story of how his gang's reign unfolded and how close they came to slipping away. The web of blood. The Sorokino arrests were a breakthrough, but the police knew they were only scratching the surface. Fingerprints, ballistics, and Zoya Grishina's testimony tied Smeyan's gang to the January 14th massacre. But the sheer brutality suggested a pattern. The homemade pistol, its barrel scratched and worn, hinted at heavy use. The scattered liquor bottles and precise headshots spoke of a group both reckless and methodical. As detectives interrogated the trio, they pieced together a chilling timeline. Smeyan, the ringleader, was no stranger to crime, with a rap sheet dating back to his teens. Koryakin and Laricheva, though, were newer players, broken souls molded by Smeyan's will. But how many others had they killed? And where? The first clue came from Laricheva. Under pressure, her defiance cracked. "It wasn't just Sorokino," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "There were others, Stupino, Elektrogorsk, more." Her words sent a chill through the room. Detectives scrambled to cross-reference unsolved cases in the Moscow region. A robbery homicide in Stupino, December 1992, matched the gang's MO. An elderly couple and their grandson bound and slaughtered. Another in Elektrogorsk days before, a dental technician, his skull cleaved by an axe. Each scene was a mirror of Sorokino, chaos staged with surgical cruelty. Smeyan's gang wasn't just opportunistic, they were prolific, striking at will across a 100-kilometer radius. The rules of the game. Smeyan's crimes followed a grim playbook refined over months. He'd case a town from an electric train, pointing at houses like a gambler picking cards. "That one," he'd say, his finger jabbing at a well-kept home. Larrycheva would knock, her innocent face disarming victims. Koryakin would secure the scene, his Marine training making quick work of ropes and gags. Smeyan, always armed with his pistol or an axe, directed the carnage. The goal was simple: take everything, money, jewelry, clothes, and leave no one to talk. But for Smeyan, the loot was secondary. The real prize was control, the thrill of watching fear bloom in his victims' eyes. "You kill with pleasure," he told Larrycheva, "or you're nothing." To him, each murder was a move in a twisted game, and he was always the winner. The gang's efficiency was terrifying. In Stupino, they'd killed an 11-year-old boy to test Koryakin's loyalty, leaving 22 stab wounds as proof of his commitment. In Elektrogorsk, Smeyan had toyed with Evgeny Salnov, offering vodka before splitting his skull. Larrycheva's role grew darker with each job. At first a lookout, she soon graduated to binding victims, her hands steady as she tightened ropes. Smeyan's influence was total. He'd turned a drifter and a soldier into extensions of his will, but his arrogance was his Achilles heel. The dropped pistol, the liquor bottles, the surviving witnesses, these were cracks in his armor, and the police were prying them open. The survivors' tales. The investigation gained momentum from those who escaped Smeyan's wrath. Valentina Mikotina, attacked in November 1992, was a miracle case. Stabbed 6 times in a Moscow elevator, she'd played dead as Koryakin and Smeyan fled. Her description of a short, intense man with a homemade gun had sat in a file, unnoticed until now. In Stupino, Victoria Filatova, the grandmother, survived an axe blow, but was left paralyzed, her mind locked away. Zoya Grishina, the Sorokino survivor, was the key. Her brief words, 3 of them, Stas, gave the police a name and a face. Grishina's condition was critical, but her survival was a beacon. If she woke, she could confirm more details. For now, her whisper was enough to keep the pressure on. Detectives mapped the gang's movements, tracing their train routes. The electric trains, cheap and anonymous, were Smeyan's highways. He'd board in Moscow or Pokrov, scout targets, and strike, vanishing into the next carriage. The police issued alerts to station agents, hoping to catch sightings of a short man in red gloves. Meanwhile, forensic teams worked overtime. The pistol's casings linked to multiple scenes, and fingerprints from Smeyan's sister's house tied him to the liquor bottles in Sorokino. But the gang's scope was daunting. Reports of similar crimes, home invasions, executions, poured in from Noginsk, Orakhovo, Zuyevo, and beyond. The police feared Smeyan's body count was far higher than they knew. The devil's disciple. Koryakin's interrogation revealed the gang's inner workings. At 23, he was a shell of the Marine he had once been. Smeyan had broken him, not with force, but with promises. Money, respect, a life, Koryakin said, his voice flat. He made it sound easy. Smeyan's charisma was a weapon, turning Koryakin's shame into obedience. The Marine's first kill, Mikotina, had been a test, but the Stupino boy's murder was his true initiation. Koryakin described it clinically: the boy's muffled cries, the knife's weight, Smeyan's approving nod. "I didn't want to," he said, but he was always watching. Smeyan's presence was a leash, tightening with every job. Koryakin wasn't just a killer, he was a prisoner, bound by fear of the man who had stolen his soul. Larrycheva's story was different. At 20, she'd fallen for Smeyan's intensity, seeing him as a savior in a world that offered her nothing. "He said I'd be strong," she told detectives, her eyes distant. "He said I'd learn to love it." Her first job in Stupino, watching Koryakin kill the boy, had sickened her, but Smeyan's words, "habit makes it easy," kept her in line. By Sorokino, she was tying gags, her hands steady. Laracheva's transformation was Smeyan's triumph. He'd turned a lost girl into a killer's apprentice. But her confession, halting and tearful, gave detectives leverage. She named dates, places, victims. Each detail was a nail in the gang's coffin. The expanding circle. By late January, the investigation uncovered a fourth member, Alexei Igorkin, a latecomer to the gang. Recruited through Koryakin's wife's friend, Igorkin joined in early 1993, just before Sorokino. His debut was a New Year's attack, days before the massacre. Smeyan, flush with holiday loot, targeted a house with 5 residents. Igorkin played lookout, nervous but eager. Smeyan, as always, called the shots. When one victim resisted, Smeyan handed Igorkin a sawed-off shotgun. "Your turn," he said. Igorkin froze, then fought back, knocking the gun away. Bullets hit the floor and ceiling as he fled. The gang killed 4, but Igorkin's rebellion left a loose end. Detectives tracked him down in Noginsk, his testimony adding weight to the case. "Smeyan was a devil," Igorkin said. "He loved the blood." The New Year's attack was a turning point. Smeyan's control, once ironclad, showed cracks. Igorkin's defection, though costly, didn't stop him. He pushed Koryakin and Laracheva harder, as if daring the world to catch him. The Sorokino job was his boldest yet, a middle finger to a system he believed couldn't touch him. But the police were closing in, their net tightening with every lead. The Moscow Regional Prosecutor's Office took over, signaling the case's gravity. Smeyan's gang wasn't just a local problem, it was a regional crisis, a symbol of an era where evil thrived unchecked. The mind of a monster. Smeyan's interrogations were a study in defiance. He admitted little, his answers laced with smirks. "You think you know me?" he taunted one detective. But his actions spoke louder. Between crimes, he'd carved religious icons, their serene faces a grotesque contrast to his deeds. When Laracheva once asked if he believed in God, he laughed. "My God's stronger than yours," he said, his voice cold. Detectives saw it for what it was, a creed of power, not faith. Smeyan killed not for money or survival, but to prove he was untouchable. Each victim was a sacrifice to his ego, each crime a brick in his warped empire. His psychology baffled investigators. Was it his height, the childhood taunts that drove him? Or was it the prison lessons, the recidivist's gospel that killing was natural? Smeyan's need for control was clear in his gang. Koryakin and Laracheva weren't partners. They were puppets, their wills crushed by his. Yet Smeyan's charisma was undeniable. He could charm a stranger, command a room, bend the weak to his purpose. This duality, charmer and killer, made him dangerous. It also made him unforgettable, a specter haunting Kashira's nightmares. The suburbs hold their breath. By February 1993, the investigation was a juggernaut. Detectives worked round the clock, chasing leads across the Moscow region. Families in Stupino, Elektrogorsk, and Noginsk came forward. Their stories eerily similar. Bound relatives, missing valuables, bodies left like discarded dolls. The body count climbed, 10 confirmed, likely more. Smeyan's gang had turned the suburbs into a killing ground, their randomness making them impossible to predict. Kashira, once a haven, was now a ghost town of fear. Doors were bolted, neighbors eyed strangers with suspicion. The police, under pressure, vowed justice, but the scale of the crimes was overwhelming. Smeyan, Koryakin, and Laricheva sat in cells, their fates uncertain. Igorkin, cooperating, faced a lighter sentence. The Moscow Regional Court loomed, but the trial was months away. For now, investigators built their case, brick by bloody brick. Each victim's story, Mikhatina's survival, Filatova's silence, Grishina's whisper, fueled their resolve. But Smeyan's shadow lingered. His calm in custody, his cryptic taunts, hinted at more secrets. Had he acted alone before the gang? Were there other accomplices? The answers lay in the weeks ahead as the suburbs braced for the trial of a monster who'd made their homes his playground. Chapter 4, The Reckoning. March 1993, Kashira's police have their monster in chains, but Stanislav Smeyan's shadow grows darker. As the trial looms, secrets unravel, and a final act of defiance shocks the suburbs. Can justice cage a devil who believes he's a god? The Noginsk pretrial detention center is a fortress of gray concrete, its corridors echoing with the clank of steel doors. It's March 20th, 1993, and Stanislav Smeyan sits in cell 43, his red gloves long confiscated, his empire reduced to a 6-by-8-foot cage. The Moscow region holds its breath as investigators build a case against his gang, now linked to at least 10 murders and countless robberies. Smeyan, Viktor Koryakin, and Elena Laricheva face the weight of their crimes, while Alexei Igorkin, the defector, trades testimony for leniency. But Smeyan isn't done. Even behind bars, his presence is a coiled threat, his smirks taunting detectives who thought they'd won. As the Moscow Regional Court prepares for a trial that will define an era, a sudden act will shake the investigation to its core, leaving Kashira to grapple with a question: can justice ever tame a man who worships his own darkness? The case takes shape. In the weeks since the Sorokino arrest, Kashira's police station has become a war room. Files spill across desks, maps of the Moscow region are pinned with red markers, and weary detectives chain smoke through sleepless nights. The evidence against Smeyan's gang is overwhelming. Fingerprints on liquor bottles, ballistics tying the homemade pistol to multiple murders, and survivor Zoya Grishina's testimony naming Stas. Laricheva's confessions have mapped a trail of blood, Stupino, Elektrogorsk, Noginsk, while Koryakin's halting admissions confirm his role as Smeyan's enforcer. Igorkin, arrested in February, fills in gaps, detailing the New Year's massacre that left 4 dead. By March, prosecutors count at least some 10 confirmed victims, with more cases under review. Smeyan's gang wasn't just a criminal outfit, it was a plague, infecting the suburbs with fear. The Moscow Regional Prosecutor's Office, now leading the case, faces pressure to deliver. The early 90s have seen crime spiral, and Smeyan's spree is a public relations nightmare. Families of victims, Valentina Mikhatina, the Filatovs, Evgeny Salnov, demand justice, their grief fueling protests outside Kashira's courthouse. The media, sensing a sensation, dubs Smeyan the red-gloved devil, his small stature and brutal acts making headlines. Prosecutors aim for Article 77 of the Russian Criminal Code, banditry, a charge carrying up to the death penalty. But Smeyan's calm in custody unnerves them. He's not afraid, a detective mutters. It's like he's playing with us. The monster in the mirror. Smeyan's interrogations are a chess game. He admits to robberies but denies murders. His voice smooth, his eyes mocking. Prove it, he challenges, leaning back in his chair. Detectives present, fingerprints, casings, Laricheva's testimony. He shrugs. She's lying. Weak girl, scared of you. But cracks appear. When shown photos of the Stupino boy's body, 22 stab wounds glaring, Smeyan's smirk falters for a moment. Koryakin's work, he says, deflecting. His lies are a performance, but his pride betrays him. He can't resist hinting at his power, describing how he ran things in Pokrov, how people respected him. I gave them a life, he says of Kuryakin in Loracheva, as if he were a benevolent king. His cell offers clues to his mind. Among his possessions are hand-carved icons, their wooden faces serene, almost holy. Detectives are stunned. How does a man who axes families craft such delicate art? Laracheva's earlier words echo. He said his God was stronger. The icons aren't repentance, they're trophies, a twisted reflection of Smeyan's belief in his own divinity. Psychologists called in to profile him struggle. His small stature, childhood bullying, and prison years explain his need for control, but his glee in killing defies logic. He's not insane, one profiler concludes. He's chosen this. It's who he is. Smeyan's God isn't in the heavens. It's in the fear he inspires, the blood he spills. The puppets break. Kuryakin and Laracheva, meanwhile, unravel. Kuryakin, once a Marine, is a husk. In interrogations, he stares at the floor, his hands trembling. "I didn't want to," he repeats, describing the Stupino boy's murder, the Sorokino headshots. "Smeyan made me." Detectives press. Why not run? Kuryakin's answer is chilling. He'd find me. He always did. Smeyan's control was psychic, a leash of fear and loyalty. Kuryakin's pipes, the Kuryakin's shame is palpable. He traded his honor for Smeyan's promises, only to become a killer. His testimony, though, is gold. He confirms dates, weapons, even Smeyan's obsession with no witnesses. Prosecutors see a death penalty in his future, but Kuryakin seems resigned, as if death is a release. Laracheva's collapse is slower, messier. At 20, she's a paradox, part victim, part monster. She sobs through confessions, detailing her role in Sorokino, how she tied gags while Smeyan shot. "He said I'd be strong," she says, her voice breaking. "I thought I loved him." Her words paint Smeyan as a cult leader, his charisma a trap. But detectives aren't swayed by tears. She bound victims, watched murders, never fled. Her youth might earn leniency, but her hands are stained. Laracheva's testimony is the case's backbone, linking Smeyan to every major crime. She describes his rituals, the red gloves, the pre-job vodka, the way he'd whistle after a kill. "He was happy," she whispers. "Happier than I've ever seen anyone." The suburbs scars. Outside the cells, the Moscow suburbs are a wounded landscape. Kashira, Stupino, Elektrogorsk, towns once defined by community now lock their doors at dusk. The Filatov family's surviving relatives speak at a vigil. Their voices raw. "Maxim was 11, his aunt says, clutching a photo. "Why a child?" Evgeny Salnov's widow too haunts the courthouse. Her husband's final plea, "Take anything, just live," etched in her memory. Zoya Grishina, still in hospital, is a symbol of resilience. But her recovery is slow, her mind scarred by the Sorokino slaughter. The media amplifies the pain, with headlines screaming of the Devil's Gang. Public fear morphs into anger, demands for the death penalty growing louder. The police, under scrutiny, feel the weight. The investigation scope, dozens of crimes, hundreds of witnesses, strains their resources. New leads emerge weekly: a robbery in Rekovo-Suyevo, a missing family in Noginsk. Detectives fear Smeyan's solo crimes pre-1992 could push the body count higher. Forensic teams re-examine cold cases, finding his fingerprints in unexpected places. The Moscow Regional Court sets a trial date for August 1993, but prosecutors worry. Smeyan's defiance, his refusal to confess fully, risks a weaker case. Koryakin and Laracheva's testimonies are damning, but Smeyan's charm could sway a jury. He's a showman, a prosecutor warns. We can't let him perform. The final act. On March 20th, 1993, the investigation takes a shattering turn. At 6 a.m., Cell 43's guard hears pounding on the door. "Get someone, now!" prisoner shouts. The guard enters and freezes. Smeyan hangs from a bedsheet noose, his body limp under the cell's dim bulb. The prison doctor, summoned minutes later, confirms death by suicide. Stanislav Smeyan, the red-gloved devil, is gone at 32, his final act stealing the trial's spotlight. Detectives are stunned. He didn't seem the type, one says, recalling Smeyan's bravado. Others suspect a message. Even in death, Smeyan controls the narrative, denying justice its moment. The suicide ripples through Kashira. Victims' families feel cheated, their closure snatched away. "He escaped," Salnov's widow says, her voice bitter. Prosecutors, though, press on. Koryakin, Laracheva, and Igorkin remain, their trial a chance to expose the gang's horrors. Smeyan's death complicates the case. His confession could have sealed it, but the evidence is ironclad. Laracheva's detailed accounts, Koryakin's corroboration, and Igorkin's insider perspective paint a vivid picture. Forensic links, casings, prints, the pistol tie the gang to every major crime. The icons found in Smeyan's cell become a grim exhibit, proof of his twisted psyche. The trial looms. By April, the Moscow Regional Court prepares for a historic case. Koryakin faces the death penalty, Laracheva and Igorkin lengthy sentences. Prosecutors build a narrative. Smeyan as the mastermind, his gang as pawns in a bloody chess game. The suburbs watch, their wounds still fresh. Kashira streets, once vibrant, are quiet, the massacre's memory a permanent scar. The trial, set for August 29, 1993, will be more than a legal reckoning. It's a chance to reclaim a region from fear. But Smeyan's absence looms large. His suicide, some whisper, was his final taunt, a way to spit on the system that caged him. Detectives, reflecting on the case, grapple with Smeyan's enigma. His icons, his stronger god, his glee in killing, were they madness or method? He wanted to be bigger than life, a profiler says. Death was his way to stay that way. The suburbs, though, can't dwell on philosophy. Families mourn, survivors heal, and police brace for the trial's glare. The red-gloved devil is dead, but his legacy, fear, loss, a shattered trust, lives on. As August approaches, one question burns. Will justice for Koryakin and Laracheva heal Kashira, or will Smeyan's shadow linger, a reminder of an era when monsters walked free? Chapter 5, Ashes and Shadows. August 29, 1993. The Moscow Regional Court holds its breath as verdicts are read for Stanislav Smeyan's gang. With the red-gloved devil gone, one question lingers. Can justice heal Kashira's wounds, or will his shadow forever haunt those who survived his nightmare? The courtroom in the Moscow Regional Court is a cramped chamber, heavy with the scent of polished wood and nervous anticipation. It's August 29, 1993, and the air hums with the weight of history. Families of victims, hollow-eyed, clutching photos of lost loved ones, pack the benches alongside reporters and Kashira residents whose lives were shattered by Stanislav Smeyan's reign of terror. Viktor Koryakin, Alina Laracheva, and Alexei Igorkin stand before the judges, their faces etched with exhaustion and dread. Smeyan, the mastermind, is absent, having hanged himself in his cell 5 months ago, but his presence looms in every piece of evidence, every whispered memory of blood. Prosecutors have laid bare a mountain of proof: fingerprints, ballistics, survivor testimonies, and the accused's own confessions. 10 confirmed murders, dozens of robberies, entire towns paralyzed by fear. This trial is more than a legal reckoning. It's a desperate bid to restore a sense of safety to Kashira in the Moscow suburbs. But as the gavel falls, the truth becomes clear. Some wounds never heal, and Smeyan's shadow is longer than any verdict. The trial's climax. The trial, spanning weeks, has been a grueling spectacle. Prosecutors meticulously unraveled the gang's crimes, each detail a fresh wound. Zoya Grishina, the Sorokino survivor, took the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted the night of January 14th, 1993, when Smeyan's pistol stole 4 lives. "I saw his eyes," she said, her words silencing the room. "He enjoyed it." Valentina Mikotina, stabbed 6 times in a Moscow elevator, spoke of playing dead to survive, her scars a testament to the gang's brutality. Families of the Stupino victims, the Filatovs, including 11-year-old Maxim, wept as coroners described 22 stab wounds on the boy's body. Evgeny Selnov's widow, her voice breaking, recalled his final plea: "Take anything, just live." The courtroom, packed daily, absorbed each story like a collective penance, a ritual to exorcise the horror. Kuryakin, Laracheva, and Igorkin faced the evidence with varying defiance. Kuryakin, the ex-Marine, stood rigid, his confessions from interrogations read aloud. "Smeyan made me. I had no choice." His claim of coercion fell flat. Jurors saw a man who'd bound victims, stabbed a child, and followed orders without fleeing. Larry Cheva, barely 20, was a study in contradiction. Her tears and claims of love for Smeyan clashed with her actions, tying ground, watching murders, never resisting. "He said I'd be strong, Shaw," she sobbed. But the courtroom saw no victim, only a killer's apprentice. Igorkin, the latecomer who fled during the New Year's massacre, was the least culpable. His cooperation earned some sympathy, but his role in the gang's early crimes sealed his fate. The prosecution's case, built on forensic links, casings, prints, the homemade pistol, and survivor accounts, was airtight. Smeyan's suicide, though a blow, didn't weaken it. His icons, displayed as exhibits, chilled the room, their serene faces a mockery of his bloodshed. The verdicts. As the judges deliver their verdicts, the courtroom is still, the air thick with expectation. Kuryakin, charged with banditry and multiple murders under the Article 77, faces the harshest fate. Viktor Kuryakin, guilty, the judge intones, sentenced to the exceptional measure of punishment, death. A gasp ripples through the crowd. Kuryakin's face is blank, his eyes fixed on the floor. In 1993 Russia, the death penalty is rare, a nod to global humanitarian trends. But the gang's savagery demands it. Laracheva, guilty of banditry and complicity in murder, receives 8.5 years. Her youth and cooperation spare her a harsher sentence, but her sobs echo as she's led away. Igorkin, convicted of lesser charges, gets 8 years, his defection and testimony softening the blow. The sentences, read under the judge's stern gazes, are a hammer blow to the gang's legacy. But Smeyan's absence gnaws at the victory. "He escaped us," a juror whispers, echoing the family's frustration. The verdicts close a chapter, but not the book. On April 13, 1995, the Russian Supreme Court upholds the sentences, rejecting Kuryakin's appeal. His execution date looms, a final reckoning for a man who traded honor for blood. Laracheva and Igorkin begin their sentences, their lives forever marked by Smeyan's shadow. The courtroom empties, but the families linger, their relief tempered by loss. "It's not enough," says the Filatov's aunt, clutching Maxim's photo. "Nothing brings him back." Kashira's wounds, raw and deep, defy the closure the trial promised. Smeyan's suicide, his final act of control, has robbed them of facing their monster. The suburbs' long recovery. Kashira, Stupino, Elektrogorsk, the suburbs Smeyan terrorized, are changed forever. By late 1993, the towns are quieter, their streets emptier at night. Doors once left unlocked now bristle with bolts, and neighbors eye strangers with suspicion. The Sorokino massacre, with its bound and executed victims, is a ghost story told in hushed tones. Zoya Grishina, discharged from hospital, moves away, unable to face the house where she lost friends. Valentina Mikatina, her scars a daily reminder, speaks at victims' vigils, her survival a beacon of resilience. The Falatovs' home in Stupino stands empty, its windows dark, a monument to loss. Evgeny Salnov's widow sells their house, fleeing memories of his axe-split skull. The suburbs, once tight-knit, are fractured, their trust eroded by a gang that struck at random. The media, relentless through the trial, shifts focus to Russia's broader crisis. Smeyan's spree, they argue, is a symptom of the 90s chaos, economic collapse, weak policing, a society unmoored. In 1990, Russia records 32,000 murders, a statistic that dwarfs the gang's toll but underscores their era. Editorials demand reform, but change is slow. Kashira's police, hailed for the arrests, face criticism for missing earlier clues. We were stretched thin, a detective admits. Smeyan slipped on through. The trial exposes systemic failures, but also human ones. How Smeyan's charisma bent Koryakin and Laricheva, how desperation made them complicit. The suburbs, healing slowly, grapple with a new reality. Safety is no longer a given. The Devil's Legacy. Smeyan's suicide on March 20th, 1993, remains a wound that festers. Detectives, reflecting on his final act, debate its meaning. Was it cowardice? Fear of the trial's exposure? Or was it defiance, a refusal to let the system claim him? He wanted to be bigger than life, a profiler repeats, pointing to the icons found in his cell. Those carvings, with their serene faces, are auctioned as macabre relics, their proceeds aiding victims' families. Smeyan's stronger God, his belief in murder as power, haunts the case. Laricheva's testimony, read in court, chills. He said it was his right, like he was chosen. Smeyan's psychology, part Napoleon complex, part prison-forged nihilism, defies easy answers. He wasn't mad, but he was monstrous, a product of an era that let predators thrive. His gang's collapse offers lessons, but no comfort. Koryakin, awaiting execution, is a cautionary tale of weakness exploited. Laricheva, in prison, is a paradox, victim and villain, her youth no shield from guilt. Igorkin, the least tainted, carries the stain of his brief allegiance. Their stories, splashed across newspapers, warn of charisma's danger, of how a man like Smeyan could turn lost souls into killers. But the suburbs don't need warnings. They've lived the nightmare. Kashira's children grow up hearing of the red-gloved devil, a boogeyman woven into their folklore, his red gloves a symbol of the terror that once stalked their streets. Parents hush their stories, fearing the name alone might summon his ghost. The electric trains, Smeyan's highways of death, still rumble through the suburbs, but commuters now sit tighter, their eyes scanning for threats in the dim carriages. The echoes of an era. The trial's end is not a full stop, but a semicolon in Kashira's story. Russia's 1990s rage on, a decade of bloodshed and upheaval. Smeyan's case, though infamous, is one thread in a tapestry of violence. 32,000 murders in 1994, a million serious crimes, a nation fraying at the seams. Kashira mirrors this struggle, its recovery a microcosm of a country groping for stability. Markets reopen, children laugh again, and doors creak ajar. but the scars remain. Empty homes dot the suburbs, their windows boarded like closed eyes. Vigils, once crowded, dwindle, but candles still burn for Maxim, Salnov, and the others, their names etched in communal memory. The police, bolstered by the case's publicity, push for reforms, but resources are scarce. Detectives who chase Smeyan carry the case like a weight. Some retire, others drink to forget the Sorokino bloodstains. Prosecutors, lauded for the convictions, know their victory is incomplete. Smeyan's suicide denied them his confession, his public unmasking. Yet the case reshapes the suburbs. Community watch groups form, neighbors share warnings, and Kashira's police station, once understaffed, sees new recruits, inspired by the hunt that brought down a monster. These are small steps, fragile against the era's chaos, but they signal a will to reclaim what was lost. Don't scroll past. Hit like and subscribe if you're ready for the next twisted story.